Welcome, everybody, to the latest edition of All In with Art Stapleton, a New York Giants podcast brought to you by NorthJersey.com and The Record. I'm your host, Art Stapleton, and we teased you. We teased you the other day and told you we weren't going to talk to you until the owners' meetings, but we're back. And that's because this is the Mr. Unlimited episode. Russell Wilson is a New York Giant. And I know some of you, it's always nice to hear from people who watched and listened to the podcast the other day and said, but you said it wasn't going to happen. Now, listen, I said I thought that Russell Wilson would end up elsewhere. But I did say, going back to, I believe it was March 13th, that the Giants were looking at signing not one but two veteran quarterbacks if Aaron Rodgers did not come to the Giants. And at the time, and I put up the receipt with the timestamp on my social media, I said it would not shock me if they signed Russell Wilson and Joe Flacco. And that's because Joe Flacco had visited the Giants the day before Russell Wilson visited the Giants. And I did not have the visit for Jameis Winston until the following week. So had that happened that day, it would have been Russell Wilson and Jameis Winston, and I would have been batting 1,000. But obviously, I did not have that. So, but the fact remains is that the Giants wanted to build out this quarterback room to give themselves the most options in the draft. So today's show wanted to come back, hit on the Russell Wilson signing and the Zoom call that he did with reporters on the beat yesterday, and then kind of give you my take on that, and then we'll hit on the draft a little bit and preview the owners' meetings and what may be coming up there. So, Russell Wilson. My opinion on Russell Wilson has not changed. It's only been enhanced on what I saw on the Zoom call and how he engaged. And, you know, I'm going to be honest. Russell Wilson is very polished, which we knew. He knows what he wants to say. Sounds like he's reading off a script sometimes because it's just so natural to him. You're talking about somebody from the moment he took over in Seattle as a rookie at quarterback. It's just his way. So he sounds very polished. And if you're looking for somebody who's real, well, it's ironic that he was at the Garden last night for the Knicks game wearing a hat that said real on it. Now, I'm not a pop culture guy to that extent, so I'm sure there are some of you who are watching this will say, well, it's this brand, that brand, or whatever. But there is some irony in the fact that on the day Russell Wilson kind of gets picked apart a little bit for being a bit of a phony, a bit of a staged interviewee. He knows what he wants to say. He's going to give his answers, and he sounds very, he comes off very, like I said, very too polished in a sense that he rehearsed the things that he said. But the reality is that what someone told me the other night when Russell agreed to terms, and I asked, how about the personality of this Giants QB room? Jameis Winston, Russell Wilson, Tommy DeVito, and now the expectation would be they add a rookie, and we'll get to that in a little bit. But what do you think about that? And I had a couple people from the organization text me back and, give different opinions. And one person said, look, we've been milk toast in that QB room for 2 years now. 3 years if you go back to when this regime got here. And that's not necessarily meant as disrespectful to Daniel Jones, and even go back to Tyrod Taylor and Tommy DeVito, and then Drew Lock and Tim Boyle, Tommy DeVito last year once Daniel Jones left. But the fact remains is that might not be a bad thing. Let's see if Brian Daboll can handle those personalities. Maybe this offense needs a little bit of that. Needs the guy who wants to be out front like Russ and be viewed as, I'm the CEO of sorts, which is kind of what he said yesterday in the press conference. And the idea that, there are people in this organization who believe that needs to be part of the Giants' QB DNA, so to speak. be the guy who can be the politician a little bit. And that's not always a bad thing. It's not always a great thing. If your play does not match that, that's where Russell Wilson will be judged this year if he's on the field as QB1, which he said he expects to be. And at this point, I think there's a purpose for Wilson and Winston to be here if they draft a rookie quarterback. And it's not to put the rookie in that position immediately off the bat. And in this market, that certainly could hurt a rookie quarterback if they come into this scenario. And obviously everybody goes back to 2004 and Eli Manning and Kurt Warner and talking about, when Kurt had the rug kind of pulled out from under him and when Tom Coughlin and the organization decided that Eli Manning would be the starter for the rest of the season and what that did to the locker room. All of those things are out there, but it's very interesting. I pointed this out the other night when Russell agreed to terms, is that it could come full circle to him. He was a third-round pick of the Seahawks. That offseason, Matt Flynn was signed to a $10 million guaranteed contract as a free agent from the Green Bay Packers. He was going to be the starter in Seattle. And then Russell Wilson, third-round pick, comes in, beats Flynn out. Give the Seahawks credit. They went to Russell Wilson that year, and then a year later, they end up winning the Super Bowl. So when you consider where they're at this year, now Russell Wilson is the guy who signed for $10.5 million guaranteed. Yes, his contract, a one-year deal, can go up to $21 million, but there are a lot of incentives built in there based on playing time, based on production, and also based on winning. He'll get money if the Giants win and he's the quarterback. But when you talk about where they're at financially, under $15 million guaranteed to two different quarterbacks for Winston and Wilson, they are certainly not out of the rookie quarterback mix at number 3. And I might as well talk about that now and then get back to some of the things that Wilson said that struck me. But I was told, I reported Tuesday night, Shedeur Sanders absolutely, quote unquote, is still a possibility at number 3. The Giants could not go into the draft absolutely positively knowing what they're going to be having and staring at on their board at number 3. Yes, they've had discussions with Tennessee about the number 1 pick. Looks like Tennessee, unless you make them a Godfather offer with multiple first-round picks, they are not going to trade out of there. They're going to take Cam Ward. That could change between now and the start of the draft. So I'm sure Joe Schoen will stay engaged with Mike Borgonzi and Tennessee and see what happens. Could I rule out a trade for the Giants in that situation to get Cam Ward? No, I can't. At number 2, you can't rule out Cleveland taking Shedeur Sanders at number 2. You can't rule out really Cleveland trading out of number 2 if someone wants to come up and get Shedeur Sanders. I know the Raiders are committed to Geno Smith, but if the Raiders really like Shedeur Sanders, maybe somebody trades up to number 2 to try to get Shedeur. The Giants are there at 3. They're either going to get the best non-quarterback on their board or they're going to take Shedeur Sanders. And for everyone who wants to say that the Giants are decided at quarterback in the draft, they are still building their draft board in terms of quarterback. And I can tell you that because that was told to me back at the Combine. Brian Daboll, I thought he would be at pro days. He was at some pro days last year for the quarterbacks and for the wide receivers. But what I'm told is that he's putting all of his scouting effort into everything back home, breaking down tape, and then when they do private workouts. And when, obviously, the prospects come into the facility for their 30 visits. And remember, that's top 30 visits. It's just the number of visits that they can have. It's not necessarily the top 30 players on their board. That's why we call it 30 visits now, and we've kind of gotten away from that top 30 visits. But private workouts, the meetings that they had at the Combine, which are very abbreviated, we saw that in Hard Knocks, how quickly players go through that car wash scenario with teams. It's important, but the visits at the facility and then the private visits where they're allowed to sit down with the players and break down film that and put them through their script of plays to work out on the field. Not what you saw from Cam Ward in the pro day, what you'll see from Jackson Dart tomorrow in their pro day, where they run the script that they want, 55 to 60 plays of what they think will allow them to look the best. Now, do they take input from the teams that are interested in them? Sure. You know, these players are known. They know what teams are interested. If a team says to you, hey, I want to see you under center more in your pro day, then they'll decide if they want to do that. But as far as the Giants go, I don't think anything is off the table right now in terms of rookie quarterback. Do I expect the Giants to have a rookie quarterback by the end of day 2 in this draft? Yes. I mean, I don't think there's any question. If they don't, something went drastically wrong in their evaluation. And that's just, again, it's my opinion, but it's also based on what I've heard from sources within the organization. You know, does that quarterback come at 3? Does that quarterback come at 34? Does that quarterback come from 34 being traded up back into the first round to get someone who may be falling? Does that put Jackson Dart in the equation? Does that put Jalen Milroe in the equation? Are we looking at Tyler Shuck from Louisville? Giants had representation at his pro day yesterday. Do we look at a situation where Kyle McCord from Syracuse or a Will Howard from Ohio State factor in? That would be more late day 2, maybe early day 3 quarterbacks to consider. But to me, the bottom line is it starts with Shedeur Sanders, and I think the evaluations will come through well. And to me, I keep going back and forth. If Abdul Carter is not there and it's between Travis Hunter and Shedeur Sanders, I think the Giants probably lean towards Shedeur Sanders. Just a gut feeling. If it's Abdul Carter and Shedeur Sanders, I think it's probably a toss-up. And if it's Abdul Carter and Travis Hunter, I probably lean towards Abdul Carter. Now, Travis Hunter could end up being the best player in this draft. So I would not be opposed to the Giants taking him. But there's no obvious scenario to me where Travis Hunter becomes your CB1 and wide receiver 2 together in the same game as a rookie, at least not starting out. So I think that's kind of where I'm caught up with Travis Hunter. I know you can't look at things that way. So I'm not an evaluator. I'm not making this call for the Giants. They may look at it and say Travis Hunter is the best prospect on our board. And if he's sitting there at 3, we'll take him and we'll figure out what happens after the fact. You just signed Paulson Adebo to be your CB1. You have Tay Banks still in the mix, and you have Drew Phillips, who you really like, as your nickel. Could you take Travis Hunter and just say, you know what, there's room for 4 corners, and if we have to make that an absolute strength, we will? Yes. I don't see the Giants taking Travis Hunter and making him a wide receiver with a little bit of sub package on defense. Like I said, from my understanding, he's a corner for the Giants with the capability of playing a series of plays, maybe 15 to 20 plays on offense, and he would have an impact. So we'll see what happens there. There's still a lot of time to go, even though we're under a month left between now and the draft. So just consider that when you're talking about this. I know a lot of you like the idea of trading back for more assets. I know you don't want to hear this. You could always use draft assets, but the Giants don't need any more draft assets in this draft. They have 3 day 2 picks, and they actually have, the way I count it, I think it's 5 picks in the top 105. That's the first rounder, the second rounder, which is 34 overall. Then you have 64, I think it's either 64 or 66, and then 99 and 105. So they have the assets here. Yes, I understand you want to start adding more assets, but you're only going to add assets to be able to trade them and get better picks. So sometimes I think that's not a necessary move. If I'm the Giants, I'm sticking at 3 and I'm taking the best player that's on my board. And that's what I'm going to do. So I think pro day for Abdul Carter is on Friday. And my sources tell me that Abdul Carter will not work out. He's still getting back. He said at the combine he's about 90% healthy after what happened in the late in the season when he got hurt. So, like I said, I don't think he's going to perform. I would expect the Giants to have more people offensively and maybe front office wise down in Ole Miss for Jackson Dart. But that doesn't mean that they won't have representation for Abdul Carter and to meet with Abdul Carter. He could end up doing a private workout when he's fully healthy, but I don't think there's not, there's not a situation where it's like Abdul Carter can't play. We got to go work him out. I mean, I've heard that there still may be a workout, whether it's scheduled by Abdul Carter's representation or interested teams, and they do separate private workouts, but we'll get to that when we do. So I would imagine the Giants have their defensive staff at Penn State tomorrow, but I think they'll probably have their front office at Ole Miss. Now, does that mean, look, we're heading to West Palm Beach this weekend for the owners' meetings. I'll be there. We should hear from John Mara and Joe Shane, most likely Monday. And then Tuesday, Brian Dable has the NFC breakfast, which all the coaches talk. And we'll get Dable for about 25 minutes at the table. So he'll talk about a bunch of everything. He has not talked since the end of the season. So there's a lot to get to with Dable. But it would make sense to me, and again, I haven't been able to get this confirmed. The Giants are pretty tight-lipped as far as their scheduling of private workouts and how they do it. They just feel like it's a part of their process that they don't want to have out there. Now, you see some teams put that information out there. The Titans and the Browns are having private workouts with Cam Ward and Shedeur Sanders. We know the Giants are going to work these players out. They're going to have private workouts with them. We've been told that point. I just haven't been able to pin down the schedule. Now, what they did last year is they kind of tagged along some of the trips, the pro day and then the private workout the following day. It wouldn't surprise me if somehow we hear that Jackson Dart had a private workout with the Giants maybe Saturday morning, with the Giants contingent, with Dable and Shane heading to West Palm Beach from Ole Miss after that. Doesn't make much sense to go from Ole Miss to come back up to New Jersey only to go down to Florida again. Again, if it's a private workout, Dable will be there. If it's a pro day, I think Dable's kind of doing his work back at the shop. And obviously, we saw why he was not at the pro day at the beginning of the week, because Russell Wilson was in the building and they were figuring out what to do and get that contract finalized. So that's where we're at. I wanted to mention that fake report that came out yesterday that Cleveland was going to trade with the Cowboys for Dak Prescott, and the Cowboys wanted to trade up to get Shedeur Sanders. It's a bunch of BS. The only trade that Cleveland's working on in terms of a quarterback, my understanding, and I don't think it's anywhere close to being finalized, probably not going to happen until after the draft, Kevin Stefanski being the quarterback, being the coach of Kirk Cousins, having familiarity, and then obviously being the head coach in Cleveland. I could see Cleveland kind of re-engaging with Atlanta about Kirk Cousins, but that Dak talk is not happening. Dak not only has a no trade clause in his contract, but the dead money, as far as the salary cap goes, for the hit for the Cowboys would be untenable. You're never going to be able to do that. So Dak Prescott is going to be the quarterback of the Dallas Cowboys. I don't think, unless they pull off some sort of shocker that reinvents the way trades and the salary cap is interpreted in the NFL. That is a bunch of BS, which we're seeing a lot of nowadays. Got to remind you, I know it's lying season in the NFL, but it's also lying season from the accounts that are out there. I know you tag. Here's the way things go. People pay the money to get the blue check now on X, on Twitter, and they attach NFL or Scout or something in their bio, and then they just pump out information. And most of it is false. Most of it is false when it's written. And then if it comes true, you'll see that person tag it on that account. Why? Because traffic means money on X. For people who do not do this for a professional living, you can make money off of ads on X. So that those accounts that got mileage out of putting out that Deion Sanders said that he wants New York, they want New York for Shador, and it went out, and there were two accounts that were primarily responsible, and then it was irresponsible for news gathering information outlets to use that and not question it. And I questioned it immediately. I said, where's the video? Because nowadays, if you don't have video and you're taking it at face value, look, if Deion Sanders was in a public event and said that he wanted Shador Sanders to go to New York, I guarantee you that Adam Schefter and Ian Rappaport and Jordan Schultz and Mike Garafolo and the guys who are the national network, I get lost in that. People want to know, oh, you're a local beat. How come you can't compete with those guys? Because we all serve different resources. If Deion made that comment, it would be out there and validated by legitimate news sources and not the fake accounts that put things out there and that all of a sudden people just run with, and it's crazy. So that's on that. Let me go on my Russell Wilson takeaways. And one other thing, Paul Wood, my producer, asked me, will Deonte Banks change his number from number 3 to give it up to Russell Wilson? My understanding is that is not going to happen. Russell's going to have to pick a new number. And that's just the way it is. Unless he decides to, give Deonte Banks $3 million for the number 3, Russell Wilson is going to be picking a new number with the Giants. And I would imagine that he is not going to take number 2 because Giants may want to hold that open just in case Shador Sanders ends up being the first-round pick here for the Giants. So, all right, a couple things to take away from Russell Wilson. Number 1, like I said in the beginning, he's very polished, almost too polished. You want to see him, let's see him stumble over a couple words a little bit. Everything is love the guys, love the guys, love the guys. I mentioned this yesterday, 21 name drops from Russell Wilson over the course of a 21-minute video call of Giants people. Now, look, I know the cynic will say, big deal. I think I even had people say to me, he just went to Chat GPT or, whatever, Grok or whatever, and just got a list of Giants names and decided he was going to drop a few of them. No, it was obvious that Russell Wilson had not only taken things from his meeting with front office and the coaches about players to highlight. He watched film of the Giants. It's easy to say Malik Neighbors, but when you start talking about Theo Johnson a lot, but then you're name dropping. Look, he name dropped Chris Manhertz and Greg Dulcich because he was teammates with them in Denver. But when you're name dropping Tay Banks in your final answer about how you think he's a young guy with upside, and you mentioned Javon Holland, and you mentioned Andrew Thomas, but also Greg Van Roten, and you name dropped Jalen Hyatt and talked about how you talked to him and how you think you can kind of help him expand his game. We all know, we've been talking about it forever. Jalen Hyatt's the deep ball down the sideline. Nobody has thrown a better deep ball in this league since I've covered it better than Russell Wilson. So it may not be the same now across the board. Russell's not the same player he was when he was winning the Super Bowl with Seattle, and he lost that other Super Bowl to the New England. But that could be something that really, to me, shows that it's not just lip service, that he really is digging in a little bit and talking about Giants players. So if he's invested, We'll see how much he has. Now, he believes he's a starter. I mentioned the scenario earlier. If a rookie comes in and beats him out, all of a sudden it's the same scenario that Russell had when he was a rookie and Matt Flynn was in Seattle. We haven't heard from Jameis yet. That'll be interesting. We haven't heard from Tommy DeVito yet. And I know everybody, Tommy DeVito goes from the one-man QB room where Joe Shane mentioned he was here, Tommy was here, signs his exclusive rights free agent deal. It's non-guaranteed, to now is Tommy DeVito the odd man out. I think they'll let this play out for a while. I don't think the options are there for Tommy yet. He's better off just staying here, maybe picking up what he can from Russell Wilson and Jameis Winston, and maybe if a rookie is here, he's the one who is really the hands-on helping a rookie with this offense because he just went through it not so long ago. And I think he's a valuable resource in that room for everyone who doesn't know this offense yet. Is going to have to be on an accelerated path to learn this offense. Other things that Russell Wilson said, the idea of being an underdog and a chip on his shoulder because he's only 5'11". I mean, he's said all these things in his career. The reality is that, if Russell Wilson comes here and plays exactly how he did in Pittsburgh last year and gets the same results and wins 6 games and gets the Giants in the playoffs, and even if they lose their final 5 games of the season the way the Steelers did, if Russell Wilson quarterbacks the Giants in his 1 year to the playoffs, they've accomplished what they wanted to accomplish. That means that Russell Wilson likely got the most out of Malik Neighbors and Tyrone Tracy and Theo Johnson and Darius Slayton and Jalen Hyatt and Wan'Dale Robinson. That's what they need. They need a stabilizing force here to get the most out of. He needs to be a force multiplier. He needs to be able to get these younger players to another level of expectation, another level of production. And the Giants had a player here who had that mentality, and that was Saquon Barkley. But as running back, he can't do the things that a quarterback needs to do to get these players to another level. And I think that's what the Giants are hoping for. I think they're hoping that, this team gets a little bit of a spark from the different personalities that are there. I think when you look at Russell Wilson, he and Jameis Winston couldn't be more different in terms of how they approach things. But as long as they don't butt heads and go up against each other and they're working together and pulling in the same direction, and then you have the rookie who, look, whatever rookie comes in here, you pick what you need to learn from Russell Wilson and Jameis Winston. And like I said, even Tommy DeVito. I know you have a lot of people out here who are, come on, Art, it's a gimmick, it's over. But there is value in someone who's been in this offense for 2 years, who knows the language that Brian Dable and Mike Kafka and Shea Tierney want to speak. And there is value in having him here. So my expectation would be DeVito is here through the summer. You never know who gets hurt. Why are you going to let DeVito go elsewhere until you have to make that call? And then DeVito would have to make that call. If the Giants end up cutting Tommy DeVito because they have Wilson and Winston and a rookie, he's got to make that call. Does he want to go somewhere else and try to latch on, or does he want to go to the practice squad? Is that an option? Do the Giants want him here as an option? Because you just don't know. Russell Wilson won't be here next year. Then all of a sudden, Tommy DeVito, maybe he signs a league minimum deal to be the third quarterback again next year. So, like I said, that's where things are. Overall, for Russell, he is who he is. And as long as you can embrace the idea that he's doing his best for you and not just for him, I think it'll mix fine in this locker room. This locker room needs a little positivity. And if the Giants are 1-6 and he's not playing well and he's talking about, all the positive things that he talked about yesterday, well, then you're going to lose the locker room. But that goes for everybody. That goes for every player, how that player approaches and where they're at. So that's about my take on Russell Wilson and where he fits with the Giants. We should get a chance to talk to Jameis at some point via Zoom next week. I will be in Palm Beach for the owners' meetings. They start up Sunday. We should have John Mara and Joe Shane with the beat, most likely Monday. And then Tuesday, we get Brian Dable to kind of talk all things Giants from the end of the season until now, and then looking forward into the draft. So hope you guys enjoyed this show. And again, I'm begging you, pleading with you, and a little bit of trying to pat myself on the back, not taking a victory lap, but we work very hard for you, the fan. We're all in for you. And you know me by now. I'm not giving you fake information. I'm not giving you BS. Try not to trot BS information back to me and want me to validate it. If I have the information, you'll have it. Now, that doesn't mean that I get everything, because I don't. And I'll be the first to admit that. There are places where I will confirm information rather than having it first. But I'm not giving you anything that is false. I'm not being used. I am not trying to manipulate the situation in any way. So for all the accounts that you follow online, you know who you are, who are just fake and phony and try to steal stuff from people who are my colleagues and peers who work very hard at this. You're going to do what you want to do. I appeal to the fan, to the consumer. You want to buy into that stuff? Go ahead. But we've built an audience here, and we've built people who follow us for the right reasons, and that's going to continue. So appreciate you, as always, being all in. We are all in too, and we will be back from the owners' meetings down in West Palm Beach, and hopefully we have some interesting news next week and even more insight as far as the Giants' draft plans and where they go from here. For Paul Wood, I'm Art Stapleton. Thanks for watching, and we'll catch you next time on All In.